Hey guys, my apologies for the technical difficulties, and we can't even see Rico either. So there you go. Start recording.
Well, as you would expect, this is a secure site, so we don't really share information.
We have had all kinds of issues, but we do. So everybody knows we do have his glamour shot right here. So this is Rico Fleshman. Say hey, Rico.
Hello, everyone.
And he is he's one of the senior folks over at Identity Guard. I am your GovBrief host, and we're glad that that you guys are with us today. Real quick, a disclaimer: this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It is provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only, and all participation in this briefing is voluntary. I could speak, and engagement by you, the government personnel, is not an indication or endorsement of commitment to purchase from any vendor. Now we can actually talk, right? So we can keep these things straight. We want to welcome everybody that's joining us today. We have folks from the Army, we have folks from the Marines. Interesting enough, that it was in the news yesterday. We have folks from GSA, VA. We appreciate you being here. If we missed your agency, we apologize for that. And we hope to do that. We have some states here too, Rico. They got passed around, so we're glad that they decided to join us. Real quick, for the briefing controls, if you have any questions, you can pop open this panel on the side, and you can ask us questions. And you can also expand us. It's actually just me today, so if you want to make me disappear, then you can make me disappear. But you can ask us questions, and then we're also going to be doing some polls. So with that, I want to ask the first poll, which is, I have experience. What have you experienced? Have you experienced credit card fraud? Have you experienced identity theft or a data breach in your agency, or healthcare fraud? You can check as many as you like, and we'll make sure that we get your information together. And we have folks voting, so you go ahead and vote, and we'll make sure we include you in our information as well. Check this out. Wow. All right, so we'll close the poll. Guess what? We have 100% credit card fraud, 100% identity theft, and 100% have experienced a breach in their agency. How about that, Rico?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty indicative of what's happening out there.
Absolutely. So we appreciate you guys being here. The reason why Identity Guard is here is because they are experts in identity theft and monitoring and data breach remediation. So tell us about Identity Guard and how you got started in this business.
So Identity Guard, we started this business. I mean, we started this industry. Our chairman and CEO, Michael Stanfield, 22 years ago, wanted to get a copy of his credit report from his bank, and they said, no, you can't have it. And he said, but it's my credit report. And they said, well, we only share that with other agencies. And so that was kind of the impetus for him to, start this company whereby people could get access to their credit reports. And then, of course, that morphed into this relationship with, these large financial institutions, mostly the top 10 large financial institutions in the country. Mm-hmm. Whereby we would allow individuals to review their credit report with those agencies. And of course, the natural segue to that was protecting that credit information. So we have been doing that as a partner to not just the top 10 financial institutions, but a partner to many Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies in America. We've been doing that for the last 22 plus years. Protected over 47 million consumers. We have all kind of awards. Data security is our primary focus. And so, that's what partners look to when they come to us. And it is what we make the mainstay of our business.
And you have regular ID protection services, which we'll discuss, right? Because the ID verification, internet surveillance, all the changing credit score analyzer, but you have something brand new that is being socialized now through the federal agencies as we speak, and that is the next generation identity protection using IBM Watson Artificial Intelligence. So we'll be reviewing some of that. In fact, next week we have a site visit, don't we?
Yes, we have a multiple agency visit here on the site to come out to Identity Guard so that we can demonstrate, the newest technology, like Dave said, and what we have with Watson, because I think it's a powerful thing to see.
It is, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So why are we here today? We're here today because we are in the middle of a data breach epidemic. We see it happening all the time. We have Equifax, we have other breaches with the Navy and OPM. Most folks that are on here know about these data breaches that have happened. But yesterday, we actually had one with a major data breach with the Marines, and it impacts thousands. So it goes from millions to thousands, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. In fact, since 2005, and I just looked at this morning, and we collected this information, 7,971 reported data breaches, over 10 billion. That's a B, folks. That's a B. And if you think about it, there's 323.1 million, give or take, citizens of the United States, and 7.5 billion citizens in the world. So take a look at these, and a lot of this is happening here in the United States, right, Rico? And that's the primary targets are U.S. So what are they after? Tell us what they're after and what these things mean, and just in case the folks aren't familiar with these terms.
So, there's personally identifiable information, and, there's three things about you as an individual that define you as an individual that never change, right? One is your birth date, your name, and your social security number, right? Mm-hmm. And so, that information is extremely valuable to those who would commit fraud against an individual and, perpetuate, malicious attacks on their identity. The same thing with health information. I use the anecdote that when I go to my kid's Little League game, when I sign him up for Little League, they always request his, medical records and health information and everything. And then, we provide that to them, but guess what? It goes back and it sits on the desk of the Little League, right? And so that's all, and literally his entire information, including our entire information, mine and my wife's, is exposed. But that data is extremely valuable. They're looking for that, anybody who would commit fraud against an individual is looking for that information because they can use it to, anything from opening credit card accounts to creating a fully synthetic ID. And that is probably the most dangerous one because it compromises your entire identity. The government employees, those with or without a clearance, represent the top ROI for these thieves because you've got the most information, or you can get the most information, harvest the most information from one agency, and then use that for malice.
And it's not just fraud; it can be more dangerous things, obviously, but proprietary data. And talk about this last one because this one is new. The personal and historic social information, because we give a lot of information out there these days, don't we?
I think we provide more information, our personal and social information than we believe. It's interesting. I was at the FTC's Privacy Summit yesterday, and the chairwoman, when she opened the conference, one of the things that she was talking about was actually personal fraud and how those attacks, now because of the Internet of Things, including in that social media, can cause harm other than financial harm to an individual, right?
And we're going to talk
about. We'll go into that a little bit later, but yeah. You're absolutely right. So, we have to look at this as a comprehensive approach. There is no panacea at this point, but because of the proliferation of social media and what individuals choose to share and what they don't realize they're sharing, it's got to be a part of what we monitor and how we protect an individual as well.
I couldn't agree more. So here's what they're doing with it. Obviously, you mentioned this earlier: financial fraud, insurance and health fraud, identity theft. We've had folks on here that have experienced these things. Releasing sensitive information. This is going out and causing problems, as we've seen multiple leaks, WikiLeaks being one of those, where it creates agency and corporate embarrassment, not the least of which is Equifax or the OMB pieces. But then we have security gaps, and then we get to this last one again, dealing with this one. Talk about this, because this is the next generation that we see. We see the new things that are happening out in the marketplace, unfortunately, in the dark web and such.
Yeah, so I mean, it's, the newest generations, they live and breathe on their device, on their portable device. And if you don't even have to have a young adult or a child to know that their face is always planted in that device. And I think the statistic is something like that they send 12,000 texts a day. Something astronomical, something astronomical like that. And looking at my own kids, I can absolutely see that. But,
hey, my kids resemble that remark.
Exactly. But with that comes, all of those things that go along with, hiding behind, the screen of a social account, and kids can be immature, and obviously we know that there's a problem with bullying and cyberbullying. And so that, again, that has to be added to the scope of the services that identity theft protection providers provide now. It has to be, because it's not just about identity theft, but it's also about privacy. And that's what we're getting to. That's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, it's not just theft. It's the whole, there's a lot more to it. So here's some of the negative social exposure. Let's walk through these. There's 4 different points here that I want to make sure folks get to see, and how this is impacting us outside of just your typical financial side of things.
Yeah, so we talked earlier about the, kind of the social impacts of this and why we need to monitor social networks. Banks and lenders are now using, social media profiles to make lending decisions. There are algorithms that can, determine an individual's worth for a loan using their social media and what's posted there, harmful things that can be posted, their associations with other individuals on social media, what they don't post, for example. All of those things are going into it. And we heard earlier or later, I guess, last year that, Harvard actually pulled, 12 or 13 admissions from students because after they viewed their social media profile, they found things that they didn't want to be a part of their culture. So it's real. It's not, something that's up in the ether or, something that's esoteric. Colleges are actually making decisions based on that, as well as banks are.
Here's a big
Yeah. This one affects, everyone who is employed, except for the 4% who are unemployed, but it affects them too if they're, going to attempt to find a job. We've known for a while that employers use, social media to gather information on employees. Again, it all speaks to, your habits, what you're doing outside of the workplace that could impact the company's reputation, could impact your employment status, and if you're going to be compliant or not, or if you're a trustworthy individuals. So, but it's actually on the rise now. I mean, more and more companies are using social media as a part of their hiring decision.
Because they want to make sure they don't have a wing nut working for them, right?
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
I mean, nobody wants wing nuts working for them. So if you can see why it's happening, and then the challenge being is if somebody gets in your business, they can really wreak havoc on those things. In fact, look at this one. This one is one of the ones that scared me when we looked at this originally. So suicide. It's crazy.
It is. I mean, when you look at the rates of suicide among individuals 15 to 24 years old, it is a really disheartening statistic.
It is.
Right. I mean, it's sad. And, I don't know if it's necessarily tied into, or if the increase there is tied into, their social media interactions. But I do know that social media as a tool now contributes to that in some way. What we've done is partnered with Megan Meyer Foundation because, and I don't know if you know the Megan Meyer story, but it is a really tragic story. And it of course, the mainstay of it is that it happened in a social media platform, and whereby a girl was bullied by another girl's mother, as a matter of fact, and Megan Meyer's daughter actually, and she she killed herself, and that's really unfortunate. But what we do, in providing the cyberbullying technology that we do, our technology with IBM Watson goes and seeks out any of those things that could be perceived as cyberbullying. And we don't purport to be able to respond to that or deal with it, which is why we have the partnership with Megan Meyer, because they deal with that on a daily basis, and they do it in an incredible way. So if we find those instances.
It's because of your monitoring techniques, and we'll get into that in a little bit, that is not just looking at the regular dark web things, but integrating social media into your whole methodology on Watson that gives you the ability to do the report to Megan Meyer, right?
That's absolutely right, and be able to pass off the individuals who are impacted, who we get alerts, we provide the alerts to, that contact us back. We are able to provide them over to Megan Meyer. But in each one of these instances, in your towers here 1 through 4, we are looking at those things because they are all now a part of our social systems. They're all a reality. And so to not, as a provider of identity theft protection, to not address those things, we would be remiss, and not providing the coverage that, we purport to be a very comprehensive coverage.
Yep. And so for the folks here in the federal world, major federal data breaches, nothing new here, right? This stuff goes way back. Obviously, the VA being the big one that got all the press for the stolen laptop way back in the day. But this is becoming, unfortunately, commonplace, because guess what? Bad guys want the government data, right? That's what they want. So they're working at getting those. And you'll notice that you had late last year was the SEC, and then yesterday, this was yesterday, folks, yesterday, the Marines having that issue that they had. You can read more about it, and I'm sure you'll see it on the news, because it is one of the hot things. And so how this is affecting folks. So on one side of the place, we're all consumers, right? And of the 10 billion folks that have been 10 plus billion that have been involved in data breaches that were reported, and there's a bunch out there that haven't been, right, Rico?
That's right. Actually, there's probably, what is reported is probably the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Which is why there are multiple states now that actually require companies to report it.
Exactly. And so, but as consumers, we see this personal damage. I had my credit card swiped, or whatever happened. It was $1,000. It wasn't. It all got put back in my bank account. However, it was just a couple of hours, the time, the anxiety, and then what happens with the paranoia that happens with that is, like, you're paranoid of everything, and you want to go cash only. And then there's apathy, because we get multiple breach letters every year, right? So we have all of those, which gives us a loss of confidence. If it's a government breach, it gets a loss of confidence in the government. From the agency side, but all of us are consumers, right? But on the agency side, for the folks that are here, you have the productivity, the effectiveness. If your agency is breached, and information is breached, there's direct costs and indirect costs. That means, how much are you going to pay for the monitoring? How much are you going to pay for the call center? All those things that are necessary when you're doing data breach remediation. But then you have other costs, which is public exposure and reputational damage, which, oh, by the way, leads right back to the loss of confidence in the government, right? So this is why this has become such an incredibly large issue. And so here's some of the impacts dollar-wise. So we have the VA, obviously, then we have OMB that folks are out there and getting out in front of Congress. And here you see one of the congressional hearings on the data breach for OMB, and high quality folks there. I know a lot of the folks on that panel. And then just last month, we had the Financial Services Committee that's reviewing data breaches. And this happens on a regular basis as it gets ratcheted up, because the public is necessarily anxious about this, right? So this is what results in additional regulations or initiatives that come down from the president or through Congress, where you have the Executive Order 13636, which is improving the critical infrastructure. And this is what was released from NIST. And we're going to talk about kind of where things are for integrating privacy and cybersecurity. You see how that's coming together? So cybersecurity is always keep the people out, but we're also talking about what they're really after, and to be able to increase the customer confidence. And that's what we're going to go through right now. And what we're after is being able to meet the requirements for the guidelines and deadlines for FISMA. We'll talk a little bit about how that's working. Cybersecurity strategies and plans to combat the data breaches, and we know that they still are happening, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But these are some of the things that are coming out from the requirements for NIST. So let's talk about the progress. Unfortunately, it's very difficult because there's a lot of data, and the government is showing slower. It's painful for the FISMA reports, and we saw that 2016 was a record year, and 2017 wasn't all that much better. But we see that the data breaches are exposing incredible amounts of information. So let's talk about what NIST is looking at for maturity level 1, which is kind of the base level, square one in being able to respond, which is, let's talk about what usually happens here, Rico. Tell us about this and what this means.
Well, so typically breaches are reactive, right? I mean, they're reactive by nature because you don't actually need to do anything until, the breach has already happened. It's kind of a post-mortem at that point. But, and typically what happens is that a notification is sent out that, the individual, that your information has been breached, what was breached, how the company plans to deal with it. You have here is boilerplate protection inflow, and that is absolutely right. It provides a number or a way for the individuals to contact the agency or company that's providing the service. And it's usually, a credit monitoring or kind of a limited ID monitoring that's set up for a specific time. And that's it. And that's, not providing any other coverage. It's not a deep dive. It is just looking at if there's anything that's going to happen to you in the near but distant future. And if that's the case, then we have kind of, insurance or, service protection set up to help you deal with it. But,
as we move on to best practices, here we see the real focus that everybody's looking at is changing from just looking at bits and bytes or worrying about what exposure there is to the agency or the company if it happens to be a company, but really getting into that deep dive from the perspective of us as consumers. We're all consumers. So if we think about how this impacts us, it'll change the way that we go about our response, won't it?
Yeah, it absolutely should. I mean, so there's more to it. I mean, the first question that should always be asked is, how did the breach occur? I mean, if it's as simple as your application falling off the back of a truck and it blew away in the wind and they couldn't find it, so the chances are that something happened with it, that is a kind of one-off incident that could be rectified. So you put steel cages on the truck, or you make the information, unreadable as it is transported between facilities. But if you're talking about your information is housed in a digital system or in a server somewhere that has been breached, and here's all of the access to the information that the individuals were able to get, that's a much larger problem, right? Mm-hmm. And as a consumer, then I have to evaluate my relationship with that organization. And if that's the government, I have to evaluate, how do we stop this from happening? I am now vulnerable because of the lack of security in this organization. If I am a consumer to a retail company, it's exactly that. Only do I spend my money here. Right?
And that's where your reputational damage, obviously the consumer of government can't stop their reporting, to IRS.
Right. But, and I would argue it needs to go 2 steps beyond that. It's as a consumer, we have to condition the consumer, and that includes ourselves. We have to condition them to think about the issue from 6 different ways, and not just the impact, of the breach itself, but beyond that. And I think you're going into this now, so I don't want to kind of jump the gun, but.
And that's exactly it. Getting to what would be proactive. So we started with the basic level, which most agencies know about the basic level because they've performed at that base level. And that creates some significant problems for them because there are some people that it's not enough, right? Because they're actually impacted. They actually need to be recovered. So here's what NIST says about it: to develop policies, procedures, and I'm going to isolate a few of these. Watch how this plays, because this is going to play into what needs to happen in best practices for your agency. So here we have repeatable, right? Policy, procedure, and strategies that are fully institutionalized, repeatable, self-generating, consistently implemented, regularly updated, and based on a changing threat. I want to talk about the changing threat for just a minute, if we can. So here was the initial threat when I was working at a bike shop back in the 80s. This was with dumpster divers, right? Isn't that what they used to call them, Rico?
That's exactly right. That's, that machine right there is, good for you for work.
So here's the thing for the millennials out there that have no idea what that machine is. This happened to be Bruce Springsteen back in that same time, by the way. So I'm happen to be a big fan. So now here's Bruce Springsteen today, but now the threat is this. It's a handheld skimmer, and that means whoop. That means the waiter at the restaurant. That means whoever it is. Maybe it's right in the checkout line of the grocery store.
And gas stations and your bank card machine, and
any place. And so just take a look at this. I'll make this a little bit bigger, but this is Walmart.com, folks. Walmart.com. For the low price of $59, you can own one yourself, and it'll collect all the information on the credit card that you swipe. Now there's advances in the chip technology and all things like that, but it still has the stripe, folks. Still has the stripe. And take a look at this. This blew my mind when I saw it, Rico. These are hackers that have their own logos. Can you imagine? You're professional hackers now. So they have their own logos and they market their services to hack professionally.
Yeah, I think the thing you're looking for here is that they're sophisticated.
Yeah.
Like with your slide with the with the credit card scanning machine, back in the 80s, I used to use this graphic where you had like kind of the Monopoly go to jail guy with his stripes on, digging in somebody's trash can, because that was what we associated with identity theft. And in truth, it's where thieves would get most of their information, right? Because you would throw away a bill that's got your personal information on it.
Yep. Now,
they don't actually even have to be in the same country to get your information. I mean, it is sophisticated beyond the technology that exists to fight it.
That's exactly right. And certainly the response for that technology, right? So here we have those professional folks, and this is where it gets to best practices for your business and mission needs. Depending on what you do as an agency, depends on what information that you have and what puts you at risk. The biggest thing, obviously, maximize your defense, right? But we also know that no matter how much you put your defenses up, if somebody wants to get in, they are going to find a way to get in. And this is what happens after the fact, where we talked about credit monitoring earlier, right? So here we have credit monitoring being the 12% of the information that that's out there. And that's only 12%. That's the same thing that everybody's been talking about for the past 20 years, right?
That's right. So I think I love the graphic of this slide. Not to cut you off there, but I love the graphic of this because it's a powerful image. One, it shows I would say that most consumers don't actually fully grasp what all is entailed in identity monitoring and credit monitoring and all of that, right? Because our initial go-to reaction is to be very protective of my credit, but your identity is so much more than just your credit. Again, when we talk about the privacy piece, it's about how you protect all of the information about you. From a industry perspective, it's how do we get the information that we need to provide that protection? And so, currently, as it has evolved over the last 20 years, identity theft providers, we cover what's called structured data, and that's, information that sits in a database about you. It could be your driver's license number, your address, your social security number, all of those things. And so we're only able to, up until now, we've only been able to monitor about 12% of the data that's out there on any given person. Now, again, with the Internet of Things and how I think it's, people produce more information on themselves in a given day than we did in our entire lifetime 20 years ago, right?
Exactly.
In one day, you're leaving so much of a data trail of all of the pieces of your identity behind you. And so there's got to be a way to monitor that. There's got to be a way to grab that information, to pull that information and, to use it to consolidate the information that we use to protect individuals. And that's what Watson does. That's what Identity Guard, with our relationships with our data providers, what we've been able to do. And then adding in, IBM's Watson and covering the cyberbullying and geolocation with crime and enhancing the way that we process our the data that we monitor, and then adding in the social component. Watson is a very powerful ally in helping us do that.
And if you think about it, this applies directly to, we had Gronkowski got robbed.
Right, during the big game.
Because everybody knew he was at the Super Bowl.
Right.
Everybody knew he was at the Super Bowl, but we do the same thing. We're like, click, hey, I'm in Italy. Click, hey, I'm down visiting my sister. My house is empty.
That's right.
We do this every day, and you wonder how these things happen. All right, we'll get to some questions here now that so we have a couple of questions already. But if you want to ask questions, you can open that panel on the side and pop it in there. You can raise your hand and let us know that you'd like to communicate with us, and we'll be glad to be able to facilitate that. So here's the question: how does the credit monitoring differ from Experian and Equifax? Great question.
So, I don't know that I fully understand the question, but credit monitoring is what, there's any number of things that, can hit a person's credit in a given time frame, right? If there are organizations that you do business with, credit card companies, for example, and they're, looking to give you a better rate, and you haven't necessarily read your agreement so that you know that they're going to ping your credit to, see if they can offer you a better rate. Those are the kind of things that show up on your credit report. Obviously, when you apply for credit at an institution, a car loan, even actually some utilities use credit as a way to provide service to individuals. All of those things will show up as a hit or as an inquiry to your credit. So for the 3 credit bureaus in the U.S., now that there are other companies who provide the service as well, but obviously the largest 3, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, it's important to monitor what's happening so that it's not provided, and I'll use the term again, as a post-mortem. Because if 9 times out of 10, if something shows up on your credit report that's not supposed to be there, you may not see it until after the fact. And then, again, it's responsive to go and try to get that taken care of, and then you got to backtrack to the organization. So monitoring a person's credit in real time or near real time allows us to catch those inquiries and provide that to the customer within about 3 seconds. Is this you trying to make this transaction? Are you trying to apply for credit here? This is where it becomes a little less completely 100% reactive, right? Because we're catching it as it happens to allow the individuals to do that. So I think that's the difference in credit monitoring as opposed to not having credit monitoring.
And to your point, the faster the better. The situation, I had a situation where the bank didn't even know, but I knew when somebody got a hold of my debit card and racked up $1,000, and you know why that is, because that's what I kept the limit pretty tight on that card. And I knew when I went to the movies and I said, "There's my debit card," and they said, "It's declined." I'm like, so I called the bank, and they didn't even know yet. So the fast, like you said, the faster we know about these things, and that wouldn't have shown up on a credit card a report anyway. It just has to be paying attention to your own business. But the other part that I think, just to add on to what you said about the credit monitoring, if you know somebody else is getting into other areas of your life, it shows that there's potential danger for the real type of identity. With I think you used the term synthetic identity.
Correct.
Yeah. And so if you know about those early, it'll help
Yeah,
protect against it.
the idea is that, sometimes it's a one-off, right? Sometimes it's, apparently one year my wife bought 4 cappuccino makers in Canada. I don't know what she was even doing in Canada, but she bought them. So, that was a one-off. And, we were able to catch it and rectify the situation very quickly. But, I don't ever want to get in the mail a credit card offer for my 10-year-old son, or a bill for him saying that, his credit card due is late, because in that instance, somebody's created a full-on synthetic ID for him,
Yeah.
because they have to have either his social security number and then somebody else's address, and then, a fake or fraudulent place of work, and all of those things that it takes to get a credit card, and they've done that in his name. That's a synthetic ID, and that's a much larger problem.
Yeah, we had a situation here in Maryland where it was a 10-year-old who bought a boat.
Yeah.
Then didn't know about it till he went to college, because why are you checking? You don't check that. And then when he went to college. So if you have any additional questions, we'll be able to answer those. You're welcome to submit those, and we will get that. So what is it that you guys need help with out there? Hold on a second. I will pull this up if I get to my polls. I need help with, and we'll get you out of here. Meeting a cybersecurity initiative, a specific problem with security, a data breach in your agency, could be. More information on next generation, or something else, please contact me. So I want to make sure we get those in there. And we'll leave you another, let's give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and boom, check this out. A data breach within your agency. So 100% of the folks. So we appreciate you all participating in that. And with that, we'll tell you how to stay out of hot water. First of all, be proactive. Get ahead of the curve as best you can. Make sure that you start to implement the best practices to get you to that level 5 type of maturity level. Look for innovation. Incorporate the next generation technology in the scope of work. You're going to see new things coming out. Make sure that your agency gets the right and updated things that actually protect your agency and the consumer. And when you concentrate on the consumer, good things happen, right, Rico?
That's right. That's right.
So,
and I mean, from the be proactive perspective, I would just offer this, that still today, with all of the technology and as sophisticated as criminals are, the overwhelming cause of a data breach is employee related.
It's process driven, not because all the technology wasn't implemented, right?
That's right.
So training is important, very important thing. The other part, just from a contractual level, establish and use BPAs, get you faster access to folks and access to industry experts, and it minimizes the paperwork, as you know, if you're here from contracting. So there you go. Procurement options. Through partners, you can purchase identity protection through GSA, through NASA SOUP. We have as far as Identity Guard is available through those, as well as through relationships, because you guys are a large company, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So you're a large company, so you don't fit the small business criteria. But if you need to run it through a particular contracting mechanism, service disabled, 8A, woman-owned, hub zone, all those things, we'll make sure that you get information that you can do through relationships. And with that, you will get a follow-up email, because there's another question here about having a copy of the presentation, which you will get. You'll get a copy of the presentation, the Q&A, supporting documentation, as well as Identity Guard capabilities and the procurement options, if you would like to do such a thing. And with that, we're going to let everybody go, because we're actually a couple minutes over. but we appreciate you all being here. Rico, next time we will get the video taken care of, because your cybersecurity bullies at your place wouldn't let you connect.
I'll be sure to pass that along to them. Thank you, Dave.
So next time we'll make sure we get your video with us, and we will be having a site visit. There will be a site visit next week. If you're interested in that, please reach out, and we'll make sure that's in the DC area and at your headquarters, which is located in Northern Virginia, if I'm correct, right, Rico?
That's correct. Intersections Inc. is the company, and we are located in Chantilly, Virginia.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thanks again for everybody being here. We appreciate your feedback and your input, and we will see you next time at the next interagency briefing, when we deal with additional privacy issues in, I think that's happening in the beginning of April, isn't it, Rico?
Yes.
Yep. So we'll get the invitations out to you as well. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.